Hello and welcome. This is the FCCMA Future Managers Virtual Bootcamp. This is video number 10. Today we're going to mix it up a little bit and talk about public works, the role of city managers, county administrators in public works, with two of our favorites, Jason Yarbrough from the city of Northport, which is in Southwest Florida, and T. Michael Stavros from Winter Haven, which is in Polk County, right between Orlando and Tampa. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start like at the highest view, because sometimes we assume people know what the heck we're talking about. Jason, when I say the word public works, as somebody who does what you do for a living, what pops into your mind?
What pops in my mind is the basic assets and infrastructure that keep a community together. It's your roads, your water, your sewer, your stormwater. And then it's also the services too. It can include the provision of solid waste service. So I think of it as the basic core elements that everything else is built upon in a community.
The bricks and the mortar.
It is.
And the underground pipes.
Correct.
But it's not police and fire, parks, except the physical aspect of the parks. T. Michael, what are your thoughts? When I say the word public works, what does that mean to you?
So I think Jason hit on the head. It's that buzzword of infrastructure. It's the skeletal system of what makes everything work. It is your roads, it is your water and sewer, but it's also things like maybe it's your fiber system if you're doing dark fiber, maybe it's your pedestrian infrastructure, if you're doing stormwater management, and that can certainly flow into your park system because you may have stormwater-based parks. So it is all of those assets that you need to really create the framework, the skeleton upon which all of our services are delivered.
And are those services in your community, you guys handle all that, or how much do you sub out to like road building? Do you have a road building crew, or how does that work?
So we do some road work ourselves, and we do sidewalks. We certainly do all of our own utility work, but there are projects that we sub out. If we're going to build a major roadway, we don't have the resources to do that, and so we're going to competitively bid that out and bring in experts that can get that done more efficiently, more effectively, and probably at a much lower cost than we could do it if we did it in-house.
And how big is Winter Haven?
Winter Haven's about 60,000 people right now.
How big is Northport?
95,000.
So you guys are above average size cities in the state of Florida. Same thing with you guys? You have some in-house?
Very similar. It really is about the price point. We want to do what we do well and do it in-house, which we do well, but that which is above and beyond, we really need to farm out at a competitive price.
So like a major rebuild of a road. Absolutely. Or something like that, but patchwork. Repairing the sidewalks, that kind of stuff you do.
Yeah, we have a major east-west corridor, Price Boulevard for us, and we're taking it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and that's going to be farmed out to the tune of about $85 million.
So, T. Mike, I want to start with you on this. Give me a case, because we like to think that cities improve people's quality of lives. That's why people are migrating towards cities. That's why we create cities, because I want better police service. I want better fire service. I want those things. And public works certainly is part of that. Got a good example of something you've worked on where you saw the impact of it, how it changed people's lives?
I think anytime you're dealing with these public works projects, that's the ultimate goal. You're trying to improve the quality of your community. If you're expanding a roadway to better mitigate traffic congestion, if you're improving water sewer services. I'll give you, a lot of our parks projects we look at as public works projects. At the end of the day, you're building major legacy assets within the community. And I can share with you a great case study on a community centers that we're building. I think from a general public works standpoint, one of the biggest ones that we've done recently, and it's in joint partnership with Florida Department of Transportation. So a lot of our roadway is not necessarily our roadway. It may be state, it may be county, or it may be local. And we had some major congestion issues adjacent to one of our newest facilities. We had built a massive field house. It was bringing in thousands and thousands of people every weekend, and the roadway system
around that. What do you mean by
field
house?
So a massive recreation center.
Okay.
6 gymnasiums, aquatic facility, all of the bells and whistles to do sports tourism. Okay, so that's bringing tons of people into an area, and it's impacting that roadway system. So we recognize that. The Department of Transportation recognized that, and we work collectively to, how do we mitigate this? Some of the roadway was ours, some of it was theirs. And so working together, how do we really re-engineer these roads to make sure that they have the carrying capacity of what's there today, as well as what we expect to be there in the next 10, 15, 20 years, which as fast as Florida's growing, that could happen tomorrow in reality. You know, that growth is happening so quick.
Yeah.
So that's a great example of where you had multiple agencies working together to improve roadway infrastructure, huge public works project. And one of the things that I'll tell you to future city managers, this is a great statement to make to your general public is, if you're on a roadway and you're stuck in traffic and you see orange cones or traffic barrels, be happy, because that means that someone has identified the same problem. They have invested in the problem, in the solution to it, how to fix it, and it's underway. So it's already been identified, it's already been funded, and it's already been let, and it's moving forward.
And those things take time.
They take a lot of time.
You know, because what I see here is, you know, you have the engineering aspect of it. Right? We're going to expand this road. We're going to do this. Then you have the eminent domain, right? We're going to take this property so we can expand this roadway. And so you got the engineering aspect, and then what you're saying is you had to join hands with DOT, which is not the easiest agency to get along with, but you had to figure out a way to work together. And that seems to be the perfect role for a city manager, to be the intermediary between the engineers, between the other agencies. Is that the role you had to play in that?
I would say absolutely. You know, it's getting the right people to the table. It's working together. It's building the relationships long before you need them, so that when it comes time for those things, you're not introducing yourself for the first time. There's already an established relationship. You know what each other's goals and objectives and capacities are. And when you look at those projects together, you can come up with better solutions.
Let me continue on to you, Michael, on that issue. You had talked about where parks. I had never thought of parks as part of public works. You explain that a little bit.
So I think probably the best example of that, I mean, they're an asset that you have to maintain, particularly when you have vertical improvements within those parks. But we're doing more and more parks throughout the state, throughout the nation, that are designed to be our capture points for stormwater runoff. And how do you more effectively manage your stormwater through those systems to get some natural percolation and treatment with it before it discharges into some larger water body? Cascades Park in Leon County,
yeah,
downtown,
perfect example.
So we have a number of those small parks that are like that they're really, first and foremost, they become a stormwater retention area that is then improved to make it a natural recreation asset as well. We just acquired 370 acres of historic wetlands that we're going to be using for aquifer recharge as part of our utility system. Okay. So again,
but you can put pathways through there, you can put bike paths through there,
so you
people
start
can
with
enjoy it.
What's the functional you need for this, and then how do you complement that with the recreation aspects around it?
What I love about this in terms of the role of city manager is you're the person who brings those things together. You have a parks department, you have a water management department, you have a utilities department, you have flooding issues in the neighborhood. And you bring all that together to say, we're going to solve your water management problem, we're going to get rid of the neighborhood flooding, and we're going to create a beautiful park in the process.
Well, I love the compliment, but I'm going to tell you, if you're an effective city manager, your staff is doing that and thinking that way.
And you're just getting all the credit?
Well, you're getting all the blame if it doesn't go right. You don't get any of the credit. But really, it's about a whole team approach, that you're having your parks staff and your utilities staff and your public works staff are all in constant dialogue, you know, sharing what they're working on and bringing others to the table, so those ideas, they occur organically within those conversations. My job at the end of the day is really to make sure that we can we afford it, and if we can't, how do we make that happen? How do we convince the elected body that this is the right approach? And then how do we get the buy-in from the general public who are going to benefit from it?
And we're going to spend some time on that. Jason, you have what's interesting about both of your areas, now obviously Florida, we're growing by more than 1,000 people a day net, but both of your regions are growing like crazy. How are you dealing? Give me an example of how you're dealing with some of the public works challenges.
Well, you know, a lot of folks don't really think about public works projects until something bad happens. In our case, Ian came, we only have 3 east-west corridors, Highway 41, I-75, and the Price Boulevard, which I talked about earlier about we're expanding. We'd already had it engineered, Price Boulevard, ready to expand it. Ian comes, washes out 4 major water crossings, and you know, as city managers, we took it, you know, the easy thing would be to put it back as it was and not make it better and live with the consequence that you're probably going to wash out again sometime in the future. So we hit the pause button, took a year to re-engineer something that was ready to roll out and go out to bid and make those 4 crossings not bulletproof, but at least 500-year flood proof to the best of our ability. The community wasn't happy, but in the long run, that east-west corridor, main artery in our town is going to just be phenomenal, and it will stand up to a lot of storms, and it won't be the last time we see a storm. So people really don't see Public Works until they need it. And
you brought up an interesting subject, which is, I remember the old joke about the engineer, the guy working on a car, and the surgeon is looking over his thing, and the mechanic looks up and goes, just like open heart surgery, isn't it? And he says, well, yeah, but try working on your car while it's still running, right? And you've got to keep things still running while improving them. How did you meet some of those challenges?
So one of the ways to meet that challenge is, first of all, educating the public. Hey, I know you're excited about this east-west corridor coming, but we're going to do some temporary fixes. Then we're going to do some permanent fixes. Like, for example, we could have put the water and sewer lines that were hanging off the existing bridge crossings, we could have put them back the way they were, but we decided we're going to invest and we're going to directional bore them underneath the water bodies, the water crossings. So that will make them more resilient. And then the other thing is taking the time to re-engineer, and now we'll be going out in the next few weeks for a project that was delayed, now going on 3 years now, or 2.5 years from Ian. So having communication with your community, explaining what is the value added of something they were already excited about, and then you have to hit a pause button to make it better because you've learned there's some
and in the short term, you have the storm to blame, right? And you can lean on that and say, guys, the
storm
screwed this up, right? So how do you, it's funny because we immediately got into communications, and that was going to be a later part of the conversation, but it sounds to me like a lot of what you have to deal with when doing, even if you're building a new park, you're expanding a road, you're fixing a roundabout, or in this case, you had a brand new project, it gets wiped out. That's both a problem and an opportunity to say, wait a second, we could build back better. So let's dive right into the communications aspect. How did you handle some of that with the community?
Well,
because they're notoriously happy about everything you do.
They're happy till they're not, and it can switch in a heartbeat. So, we had a lot of community. We had coffee with the city manager. We had community outreach. We would do 2 or 3 community outreaches a month as a normal, but we would then weave in this major east-west corridor project into that conversation. Managing expectations and explaining and being transparent. This is where we're at. We're ready to go. Now we're going to have to hit a pause in order to make it better for the future.
But one of the challenges of reaching out to people, as you probably know, I own a polling company, right? And we poll, and we asked one question. I started asking about 3 years ago, and it was, how often do you read your local newspaper? And 40% of likely voters said never. Never read either online or in print, and about another 20 to 30%. How are you getting the word out on these things? Coffee with the city manager, 60-something thousand people. How many showed up? 100, 200, 300?
You're right. So you have to hit it from multiple angles. We have our city newsletter, electronic edition. We have Facebook. We have all the different kinds of social media. We even have some young communications in the communications department moving into TikTok and those kind of things. So you have to approach people where they're at. We have a dichotomy in our community. The young folks are in the TikTok and the older folks are in the Facebook, and you have to be aware of that and go where they are, and whatever social watering hole that is, and play to that situation in that particular media avenue that they're used to, or comfortable with.
Yeah, because it's changing so rapidly. We're more siloed in how we communicate. Having to use all of those platforms across the board seems critical. And are they okay with that? Are they?
Yeah.
Because it's painful to be stuck in traffic during construction. Even if I'm happy to see those cones, but I'm also pissed a little bit because it's taking me a little longer to get to work.
It is painful, but one of the things that we do is that we'll have an intern put up a city phone and set up a Facebook Live event at the coffee with the city manager, and so we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We have an online presence at the same time that we're having a shake hand presence, a face-to-face like we're doing right now presence. So a lot of that. So we're doing a lot of killing 2 birds with 1 stone with 1 event.
So how do you talk about the communications? Because you brought it up first. What are you guys doing when you're doing these kind of big projects and they're disruptive?
So first thing I would say to a new city manager coming in is you've got to have a strong communications team. And if you go with your team that is maybe based within your water sewer department or your public works department, you end up talking a lot of the language that we talk inside, and that doesn't always work. So having a really quality communications team is critical in this. You have to be out ahead of it. You have to play offense when it comes to communication. If you're waiting to respond to the questions that come in, those questions that come in are usually backed by a lot of anger because I'm frustrated, I'm upset because I don't know. So we try and get out ahead of it as far and as soon as we can. If it's a project that we know is going to be disruptive, we do a whole lot of internal dialogue on what are the impacts. Let's look at this from every angle, from the business community, from the residential community, from those that are providing services. That could be your garbage collection, your mail service, your Amazon deliveries, your mass transit. Are you talking to those people to find out what their concerns and what impacts it will have to them?
And so you're saying start that ahead of time.
Got to.
And that requires, a quick sidebar. Yeah, if you're coming into city government now, it's no longer one person in the communications department with a fax machine, and social media is no longer, we have an intern in the basement that handles it. It has to be professionalized, just like your engineering department, just like your planning department. Because it's so much more complicated than ever before. Are you finding success in doing that? Are you still getting a lot of that?
Absolutely. And what Jason said about you have to meet people where they are. You have to use the medium that they're comfortable with. If it's the newspaper, use the newspaper. If it's social media, use social media. If it's digital communications, if it's in person,
all of that,
whatever it may be. I think that one of the things that we have prided ourselves on is we create basically a script, a playbook of no matter what the project is, here's the step-by-step process to communicate this out, whether it's a simple water line replacement in a single neighborhood, or it's a major thoroughfare, or it's a pocket park or a massive recreation center. You use the same playbook on that time and time again. You drill it in. That way you don't miss any of the points. Because you may think, this is it's a simple, utility project in a subdivision, minimal impact. Well, minimal impact to the other, 98% of the population.
But that 2% can
those
make you
people there,
crazy.
it's huge. And so you have to use the same approach there. You may be able to get through it faster, but you can't skip any of the steps. You have to be diligent in that.
Big, medium, or small, go through those same communication steps up front and keep people up to speed so they know what's going on. And that's part of the problem. If suddenly one day my road's stopped, now other than a broken water main, which you can't help, right? You can't plan on something breaking. You know what's going to happen, but you can't plan on it. But if there's a 5K in my community on Saturday morning, not being surprised fixes a quarter of the problem, half the problem.
The other thing I was going to tell you is that it's not just about the businesses and the residents and the service providers. It's also the communication to the elected body, because if Joe Citizen has a question or a frustration, we may not be the first person they call.
They're probably not.
Staff. It may be that the mayor lives 3 houses down from them and they're calling that person. So making sure that all of our team
that's the person I
is
voted
up
for.
to
That's the person I
speed.
gave $50 to. They're going to be the first one I call.
Right.
And then we talk a lot about, the 3 audiences you as a city manager have to serve. One is the public, right? And the service being provide good services and communicate with them. 2 is your commission. 3, of course, is your staff. You have to be the leader for your staff. And this is one of those examples where you have to communicate effectively to all 3 of those groups. So in any large organization, how many employees?
Right now, probably about 600.
Almost 1,100.
1,100 employees. So clearly you have different departments. It seems to me, in listening to both of you, that public works is where kind of all the departments have to come together. Because one is the engineering department scoping out this road or these sidewalks or this park or this holding pond. One's got to be the planning department. One's got to make sure you're in compliance with your growth management standards, whatever those are. And then someone's got to figure out how to fund it. So you got to bring your finance department in. And then you got to bring your... So tell me a little bit about that process, about bringing your team together on a specific project.
So one of the things that we do is we hold a internal construction coordination meeting every month. And it involves representation from every single department, including finance, engineering.
Is that a 20-hour meeting?
We've gotten it down to about an hour and a half.
Okay.
But we go through every project that is currently underway and things that are coming up. Because what you don't want to have is your utilities department go out to replace, let's say it's or let me back up for a second. You don't want to have your streets department go out and replace a road, only to have your utilities department come back 6 months later and say, I got to replace pipes in that road. You've got to have that internal coordination.
You see it all the time. Brand new road, 3 months later, someone's tearing up something,
Right.
put in a new pipe.
So the whole purpose of that coordination meeting is so that everybody knows what's going on, and we're challenging them. How does this impact you? How do you impact that? Including representation from our police and fire department. If we're going to be closing down a road, they've got to know.
Oh, good point.
They're responding to life and death situations. So having that coordination is critical. Getting all the people in the room, they may be bored to tears with a project that means nothing to them, but they have an awareness of it.
Yeah, because if I'm the
And
fire
knowing is the
chief and I'm
first
thinking,
issue.
oh, wait a second, you're going to be shutting off the water if there's a fire on that street, so I need to have a backup system to provide water. Conversely, if I'm a police department and that road's going to be cut off, I may need to have to assign police officers to guide to make sure people go around it. So I got to allocate personnel. I hadn't thought about that.
If you're a solid waste coordinator or superintendent and you got to pick up garbage on that road that you can't get down, those are the people that when they don't get their service,
that's the 1%
that's
be
going
mad.
to light up the phone, and you have to plan for that. So that coordination is critical.
So I as I'm visualizing this is an orchestra, and you're not playing any instruments, but you got the little wand in your hand, and you're doing this, and you're making sure everybody's coordinated and on the same task.
I'm not doing that personally. My deputy is doing that on my behalf. I'm a part of that meeting, but he is more the tactical, controller of what we're doing in our projects. So I leave that to him. But I'm in that meeting at the same time because I'm getting information out of it that I can communicate back to the elected body, to the various groups that I'm speaking to the person that calls up. So they're running all that. And I'm in it just the same, but I'm not necessarily the person holding the
That would be the
baton.
deputy.
My deputy.
If only we had a deputy city manager we could talk to about this. Q. Jason, deputy city manager of Northport. So are you the guy with the baton?
I am. Jerome Fletcher, my city manager, is concerned about all things internal, external. But we have a delving and a having of responsibilities. He's more elected and external focused, and I'm more internal focused, along with the other.
So you're the pipeline to him. You're the one throat to choke. If something goes wrong with these projects, he knows who to call.
You said it very eloquently.
Yeah. So what role do you play in those things?
So
do you have these kind of meetings on a regular basis?
So we have project-based meetings. Like we have a major hospital that's about to kick off, and it will have a ripple effect throughout our community. I mean, we have one of the largest master plan communities in the United States, Welland Park. It's about 20-something thousand houses, millions and millions and millions of commercial and other non-residential square feet. We have a new high school that's going $175 million high school. It's about to open up next year.
So you also got to coordinate with the school board on this thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a monthly meeting for this giant, huge, we're building a city within a city in this master plan community. And every department, from police to fire, finance, everyone is there along with the developer and having these coordinations to make sure the left hand knows what the right hand's doing. I can't say it enough. I know it's passé. You can't over communicate, both internally and externally. And I know a lot of people roll their eyes. Oh, this is another meeting. Seriously, though, making people sensitive and aware and making sure that everyone knows their role and what other people are doing is just, it is the focal point.
And I'll give you two really well-known examples. One, well-known, is St. Lucie County. St. Lucie County was built up. They didn't do any coordinating. They just leveled the land, sold lots, put up a bunch of houses, and did not coordinate infrastructure. They put them on they put them on septic, Didn't coordinate schools, didn't coordinate where parks were going to go. And the poor county is still, and Port St. Lucie is still dealing with this 50 years later. They're having to buy homes to build holding ponds because it was just gridded out. So they didn't do that coordination. You had said something when we were talking earlier, every project is, in the long term. If you think long-term is when you can save money, there's a really good example. These taxpayers are paying a heck of a lot more for those $5,000 lots they bought back in the 60s and the 70s because of the retrofitting of all that.
Focusing on life cycle cost. Is the great equalizer of projects and actions if you can focus in on life cycle costs.
Yeah, everything's expensive in the short run. But if you rented out a hardened home, that better road, that east-west corridor you're talking about, if it's built right, it won't wash out every time there's a Milton or Irma or whatever. And we're probably going to get another storm or two in the next 20 years.
Probably.
So it's probably likely. Let me ask you a question, Jason, because you're the guy with the baton. When you let out these projects, not every one of these projects, especially the big ones, can be done by your staff. So you've got to go to bid, and there's different types of bids. I know I hear these phrases: ITN, RFQ, RFP. Walk me through some of that, because that's stuff you have to know.
Until recently, we did a lot of traditional hard bids, and RFPs. A bid, RFP can be based off of qualifications and the total proposal, but we're kind of late to the party, so we're doing a lot of construction manager at risk now. Especially,
What does that mean?
Construction manager at risk, where you have you invite your contractors in to help you get the best price on quality, and the price is kind of locked in, guaranteed price. So T. Michael can help clean up, because it's kind of a recent thing within the last 18 months after Hurricane Ian. We're fixing a lot of things from Ian as a result of using this new purchase process for us. So it allows us to kind of know what our costs are and allow the people who are going to be building it to do a lot of value engineering at the beginning. So you may not need all the bells and whistles. So your contractor and your project manager can help you figure that out at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, and the public loves that you got the lowest bidder until they see those guardrails wouldn't hold, a bicycle, and you go like, well, we should have spec'd it out more. Go ahead. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, so when we talk about construction manager at risk, let me back up for a second, because it kind of communication leads into this. So when we look at the private sector projects and public projects, all right, private sector can have something come out of the ground that they've been working on for years and years and years, but the public doesn't know about it until the ribbon is cut. And they're like, wow, look how fast they got this done. They don't see any other stuff.
Going with this.
In our world, because of our commitment to transparency and accountability, we're communicating from the first day. Before the first dollar's even dedicated to a project, the public is aware of what we're doing.
Oh, we're thinking of a Northeast Park.
Yeah. And so you're getting them involved. And then they
Oh.
look at that and they say, man, it took 4 or 5 years to make this happen. And we hear that all the time.
But Joe's Construction built a building, the Empire State Building was built in 13 months.
They really didn't, but it's just the awareness piece plays into that. So I say that because if I want to move at the speed of the private sector, if I went to a big commercial developer in my community and said, how do you get your projects done so fast? Well, I get my architect on board and I get my contractor on board. I tell them what I want and we all work together to make it happen. That is the best description I can give for a CMAR project, particularly when you're doing vertical construction or even utility projects. I'm going to bring on an engineer who's going to be designing this, and while they're designing it, I've got a construction manager at risk firm that is working on my behalf to watch what they're designing and provide input to, is there a better means, method, or material to make that happen? So that they're working side by side going forward, and you're doing a lot of that, as Jason said, that value engineering on the front end, and you're not having to add time because, okay, Jason is my architect or my engineer, he's designed everything. Now I take it to you as my contractor. You spend time going through that, say these things should be changed. It's back and forth, back and forth. In a CMAR process, those things are happening concurrently. And so when it comes time to deliver the project, they're starting to build things while some stuff may still be actually in design. And you're still getting, best lowest price, best quality in the process, but you're also getting the value of that value engineering.
Well, you brought up a really interesting part, which is one of the challenges of being a local government is, let's go back to my example of a park. It first came, hey, we need a new Northeast Park. That area is growing well. And you say, okay, you have town hall meetings. And for the public, the project's already started.
Right.
And you're going through, well, where can we buy land? Where is this best fit in the long term to the growth of the community? Talking to different departments. And then finally you find a plot of land. Now you have to start the process of negotiating with the landowner if you want to buy it. Well, that's already was done before the private company came in and bought. They were going to build something. And so when people say, oh, we could have just done this fast if you'd have farmed it out. Well, not necessarily, because all that process is part of policy and planning and doing the budgeting down the road. You used the term building and designing. I heard the term design build. What is that?
So design build is kind of the in-between between traditional hard bid, which was we're going to design and we're going to bid the design and we're going to get a hard bid to build it. CMAR, you're doing both those things at the same time. A design build, you're doing a request.
What does CMAR stand for?
Construction manager at risk. Okay. So that's what we were just talking about. When you do a design build, and this is probably becoming more commonplace in my opinion from what I'm seeing, you're doing a request for qualifications to bring
an
RFQ to bring on a team that includes the architect, the engineer, the contractor, all the various disciplines. They're presenting to you, this is my team that is going to take what you want. We are going to design it and build it for you. So we've got all the disciplines together and we're going to deliver this project for you. So we're probably doing, I don't know, half a dozen design build major projects right now.
And that allows you more flexibility, right? Because if you're building something and suddenly you find a sinkhole or a washout area, that gives them the flexibility to, because if you have a hard bid and then, I come on a sinkhole, I'm like, hey, we didn't anticipate the sinkhole. We either walk away from the project or you give us 30% more to fix this. And now you're kind of stuck.
And you have to balance all three of those. There's times when you can do a hard bid. You've got a set design that you're going to replicate time and time again. It's park restrooms, same building over and over again. So I don't have to redesign that every time. I'm just going to bid that out each time.
Like a McDonald's.
Boom. It's spec building. On the design build, and the problem with that hard bid, more so than what you find in the field, is what happens to cost. Because you get that engineer's estimate of cost, and it may be 12 months later before you get bids in on that, and we can see what's happening with inflation and it drive those numbers through the roof. Yeah. Design build is nice in that it's all those disciplines are together. You're saying design this building for me and build it. The downside to that is if there's value engineering that can take place and save money, that's going to end up more so in the pocket of that contractor than it is in the pocket of the citizens.
So you're stabilizing that if it's lowered, if they could save money, you don't benefit, but if it goes up, they have to eat some of that.
They're going to give you a guaranteed maximum price for it. So we're wrapping up a fire station right now under a design build, about a $6.5 million project. That contracting team comes to us, they give us a guaranteed maximum price for the design effort. And then they come back to us, we've approved the design, they come back to us and say, we can build exactly what we designed for this amount. And we agree to that. So it becomes the amended guaranteed maximum price. If they're able to save money the way our contracts are set up right now, if they can deliver that, they find a means within the construction methodologies that they can accomplish the goals of the project and save a little bit of money, that's to their benefit.
So they're incentivized.
They're
to do
incentivized
it while
to do
keeping up to standards.
Right.
So today or this Sunday, you got a call. Water main broke. That's obviously Public Works. I want to keep that in mind while I ask this question, because you said, well, people don't really respect or understand or care about Public Works until something breaks. Well, I'm going to say that's for the stuff you can't see. But if I'm getting a new fire station near my house, well, first of all, I'll probably oppose it until it's built, then I'll die. They don't ever take this away, right? We see that all the time. But how do you handle the differences? Because it's got to be fun to build a new park, to build a new entertainment center, to build a new fishing pier for the community, because everybody's going to love you. But to reline your underground piping because it's getting ready to corrode in the next 3 to 5 years, or you're getting so much leachage in there, how do you approach those differently?
Sewer isn't sexy.
It's not.
It's not. And I'll tell you, those park projects, they can be fun when they're done, but they can be just as much of a bear and have just as much opposition in terms of the overall project. When it comes to utility projects underground, usually the opposition is the disruption it's going to cause to me while it's happening and what's the cost for it, because I don't really know what the benefit is. When it comes to park projects or things that are vertical in nature, everybody can see those and everybody has an opinion and everybody wants to have their feedback listened to. So those can be just as tumultuous, if not more so. Some of my park projects we have going on now have some of the most contentious public meetings you could ever go into.
Because of where they're located, baseball versus pickleball versus tennis.
Are you going to renovate something? What are you taking away this history of our community? All those types of things have to come into play. But when it comes to doing utility projects, that's again why communication is so important. Why are we spending $180 million to improve a wastewater treatment plant? Well, because if you don't, we're going to have really big problems. People don't really understand that when you turn on that faucet and water comes out, or when you flush that toilet and things go away, that's part of a system that has to be maintained. You don't ever see it.
No, and I think about projects like this. So your new wastewater treatment plant, you're going to put in 5 deep well injection systems, right? To send that water out, because you don't want to send it either into the Indian River Lagoon, Tampa Bay, area lakes, whatever, right? Nobody sees that. I mean, that doesn't directly impact me and to say, well, we're going to have to raise your rates because we want to go from 8 parts per billion of phosphate to 4 parts per billion for phosphate. Is that also part of the same cycle of communication?
It is, and it's so hard because it's so technical. The general public often doesn't understand.
Or care.
Well, I think they care. They just, to the extent that they do understand it, things like PFAS. And how do you manage that within your systems, and what impact does that have on your overall infrastructure for water and sewer systems?
What's PFAS?
Your legacy chemicals that
are forever chemicals. They don't break down.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the old fire retardants and plastics and things that are, have gone through the system for years and years and years. When you're dealing with regulations, whether that's from EPA or from SWIFMUD or from DEP, whoever the jurisdictional authority may be, we have to comply with those things, and we have to be able to communicate that.
Yeah, sometimes it's easy just to blame the back of the house, right? Well, the government's making us do it.
It is easy to do that, but that's a cop out, and
right.
you got to stand in the well, and you got to be able to explain why are we having to do this? Why are we having to do an inventory of lead and copper pipe within your community, and send out these letters to everybody, letting them know what's there, because the EPA requires us to do that, and then we've got to go and fix all that, and that has a cost to it. That's to your benefit, your health benefit, and future generations as well. You have to be able to explain that. You have to break it down into a language that can be consumed by the audience you're speaking to.
If I could,
please.
If I could piggyback off of T. Michael's value-added information, but there are neat opportunities that you can take advantage of. For example, I've gone to a budget meeting and I brought a section of sewer line that was falling in on itself and very highly corroded, and bringing that and during the budget, and the community, and more importantly, the elected officials who are going to be making a decision on that budget, can see what is actually there. And then, a lot of people on their annual.
Oh, by the way, that's a great idea. I got to just say, because as long as I've been doing this, by coming into the city council chambers, you're on TV, people seeing it, you get a real sense of what's happening. Right. And because it's underground and my constituents don't know, what I'm afraid of as an elected, and this is good, right, is if that thing bursts, they're going to be really mad at me. If they hit that toilet thing to flush and the thing just goes gurgle, 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 there's phone calls coming in, and that's going to take months to fix.
Absolutely. So there are opportunities to make it more visceral. And one of the things we also did in the community I work for, a lot of people just do a real boring annual water report. We turned ours into a calendar, and we took all the utility employees' kids, and we made it we wanted to kill 3 birds with one stone. We wanted to communicate the regulatory information that was required annually on our water report. We wanted to make something that wasn't going to get thrown out, that would be used throughout the year, so we made it a calendar. And then we went through from a recruitment. So we took the kids of our employees that volunteered for this and said, this is the future engineer in 2037. This is the future meter reader, in 2029. So we made it cute. We got a lot of ahs, and it made the information usable, and it also gave a tool that could be used in the home throughout the year. So there's a lot of different ways to be creative.
Yeah, you're right, because you're required to send out that report.
Yes.
And you look at the grid and it says blank, blank, blank parts per billion, and I have no idea what that is.
Right.
I know because we actually represented a couple folks, and I know 6 parts per billion is advanced wastewater treatment standards, blah, blah, blah. But I see 0.6, but I don't know what that means as an average citizen. hey, is there Viagra in my water? You know, or Prozac, or Forever Chemicals and that kind of stuff. So you guys have turned it into something fun and interesting.
Absolutely.
I love
Instead of
that
something they're
idea.
just going to throw as soon as it hits their mailbox, they're not going to throw. They have the opportunity to keep it and turn it into something that's going to be useful throughout the year for their house.
How do you differentiate between the boring underground stuff and the fun, interesting things, and managing that with the community?
Oh, you're talking to the wrong guy.
Why is that?
Because sewage and water is all interesting to me.
So you mean by wrong guy, you mean the right guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I find the biology from the wastewater treatment plant process to the more of a chemical orientation of the water treatment plant process very interesting. And
by the way, it is interesting.
it is interesting. I agree. And also being an enterprise fund from a financial perspective, it's kind of, well, it is. It is a business. And a lot of times it has to be operated and viewed as a business, even though it's providing a community benefit for all. But I love it. Hey, sewage is sexy to me.
So let me ask you a question. So I was touring Fort Pierce Utility, their wastewater treatment plant, which is on Hutchinson Island. Right. Somebody had the great idea back in the 70s. Let's put a wastewater treatment plant right on the Indian River Lagoon. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing.
So I was touring it with the project manager, Bo Hutchinson, over there, and he referenced one of the tanks. He said, "These are my children." Meaning the little critters that live in there. He's got to keep the water at a proper salinity. So the bugs. Are you that guy too?
Yeah, you got to keep the bugs healthy. Otherwise, you're going to be in a world of hurt. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so you get to know that. So let me ask you a sidebar question. As you move up through the chain of command into higher, you touch less because now you're in management. You're overseeing that. Are there some things like that you just don't want to let go of?
Yeah, but you have to reframe once you move out of the department into the city manager's suite. You have to realize that your job is to remove obstacles for people to do their job, and just realize that's the value added. That's the touch point you're bringing, is that you're helping them by removing obstacles, whether they're financial, whether they're internal policies, whether there's even sometimes external things where, from a funding source perspective, that you're trying to get from the state. Or the federal government. Obstacle remover, and that's probably my biggest job now. And that's what I spend most of my time doing, is removing obstacles for people to do their job. Because most people are inherently good and want to do their job. And my job is to facilitate that by removing obstacles so they can go do what they needed to get done.
How do you feel about that?
Very completely. It's you've got to let go.
Wait, do you find sewage sexy?
I do not find sewage sexy, but I find it essential, which is better than sexy. No, I think Jason's spot on. You've got to let go of those things, and you've got to give the other people the opportunity to do it. You said you remove obstacles. I look more so as myself as a resource allocator. What do you need to deliver that project? And it may be taking something out of the way. It may be giving you the tools that you need to do it. It's really about greasing the skid, making sure that all the people are in the room when we're making the decisions, that the commission's on board, the elected body, that our partners within the community have an awareness that I'm watching all the boxes to make sure they get checked. I'm not necessarily the person checking it, but I'm making sure that they get checked. And it's also handing down historical perspectives of, here are some challenges that we faced in similar situations that you may not have experienced, and trying to enlighten people to some of the pitfalls that may be coming with the project they're working on.
So I talk a lot about the three audiences you've got to serve, right? Your staff, the commission, and the public. Mm-hmm. When it comes to public works projects, especially those underground publics that may not be as sexy to everybody else as they are to some people, but if I'm an elected official, I'm responding to the public, right? I'm the ambassador to the public for the city. How do you convince them? One quick example. There were 24 tax increase ballot items across the state last year. 22 of them passed, meaning the voters wanted to increase their own taxes for different things. I'm talking specifically about education. Yeah, raise my taxes to pay teachers more. I get that. Raise my taxes for a force main, for an underground utility, because you got to start relining pipes that are leaching too much. I would think one of your biggest challenges is convincing the commission, I got a limited budget, I don't want to raise taxes, I don't want to raise fees, I don't want to raise rates, but there's not going to be a visible return on their investment. What tools and techniques do you use and talk to the commission to say, guys, gals, we got to do this?
Yeah, and I think that part of the challenge there is that the pushback they get from the general
That's
public.
what I mean, yeah, exactly.
When it comes to those things.
I want to pay for a new park, okay.
But if it's, we need to raise a half-cent sales tax within the county for new roadways. Well, if you hadn't allowed all this growth, we wouldn't have to do that. So they're facing that challenge on multiple fronts there as an elected person. You have to have your facts. You have to know what the legitimacy of the issue is going in. You have to educate them along the way. You have to be able to explain what are the regulations that we have to comply with. What are the cost challenges that we're dealing with? What are the implications if these things do not, if they do fail, you know, what's the other side of it? And be constant in educating them on the value of these items. If you're not doing that until it happens, you're too late. You know, that's the best way I can say it.
And I guess this goes to what you were saying, Jason, earlier about the long range. If we say, well, let's put off some of these minor repairs on the roads, push them out, those minor repairs start to erode the base of the road. So now a $3 million a mile re-asphalting becomes a $30 million a mile because I got to rebuild the road. My numbers may be off.
Absolutely. No problem gets cheaper if you ignore it. It only gets more expensive.
I'm so stealing that.
It only gets more expensive. So deal with it to the best of your ability now. And one of the things with the elected body is for better or for worse, they frequently will focus in on things they understand. They may, during the budgeting process, argue about the $100 worth of paper clips, but then they'll go and pass a $20 million reverse osmosis plant because they don't really understand reverse osmosis. So as staff, it's our job to make sure at least that it's been put out amongst the cameras and on record that, you know, here's the consequences. And another thing is trying to explain to them there's a regulatory, especially in the water and sewer world, there's a regulatory hammer that will come down. And if you get under the dreaded consent order, that regulatory agency doesn't care about your situation, doesn't care about your budget.
They tell.
You're going to fix it, and you're going to move heaven and earth to fix it.
So necessity is what you're selling, necessity, and you're selling, if you don't pay for it now, you're that old Fram oil field. You don't pay me now, you can pay me later. And you're going to pay me a lot more
It's
later.
the balloon model. You know, we typically take a balloon out, and you can, if you squeeze and scrimp on resources, it just makes the end of the balloon bigger. So that means your payment later on is going to get bigger. It's a visual that people can understand, and it tells a story really rather quickly. Squeeze the end of the balloon, the other end of the balloon gets bigger.
And so when you're talking to the commission, because you have to recognize, right, of course you do, they're the ambassadors to the public, and they're going to got to go back to the public. So you got to explain it in terms that they'll say, yeah, we have to raise this rate or this fee because it'll save us money in the long run. But the public doesn't seem to get that very well, right? Because, yeah, you're always saying that. You're always saying, pay me more, pay me more, pay me more. Are you finding this works when you talk to them?
Yeah, I do. I think, listen, you're always going to have a small group that isn't going to get it or want to get it, or they're just anti-government, and there's nothing you're going to say that's going to convince them. So, but the majority of folks are reasonable and knowledgeable, and if they tune in, because let's be real, 80% of people, as long as the water turns on and the toilet flushes and their car doesn't have a blowout when they're driving down the street, they're happy. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. And then you have the other 15.
I don't want to know anything about the sausage until it comes off the grill.
Exactly. So for those, you don't really, you make the information available, but then there's the hypervigilant ones. And those, a lot of times they're reasonable. You just have to educate them. And then there's the small sliver. It doesn't matter what you say. You're never going to win them over. But you make the effort.
Okay.
Excellent. Point I want to make on something Jason was talking about, when it comes to these projects, and particularly on the utility side, we've talked a lot about underground pipe. Yeah. We're at a unique point in modern society where the life expectancy of a lot of what is in the ground in communities that have been around for 100 years is coming to an end. And it's coming to an end quickly. And it's being taxed by a lot of growth. The demands upon the systems are greater than they have been.
Rising water tables.
The cost to replace those today is unbelievable in comparison to what it may have been when they were originally put in. And as those things are coming due, that cost keeps getting more and more and more. Cost of pipe today compared to what it was 50, 60, 75 years ago when that was originally put in. No comparison.
Well, and for some reason we didn't think long term. I mean, I know in some utilities have cardboard pipes underground.
Wood.
Now it's a high density cardboard pipe. Wait, nobody raised their hand in that meeting?
And you have systems. So our wastewater treatment plant was built in the mid 70s for the tune of probably about $26-27 million. And most of that money came from the federal government, not as a loan, but as a grant. So we're talking about a project at the end of the day will be about 10 times that amount.
Yeah, $200-300 million.
And will not have the benefit of federal grant dollars, maybe some WIFIA loan or some state revolving loan funds, but nothing compared to what it was. So the cost is much greater, and the time to get those things done is even more sensitive. But the fact that so much of that infrastructure that you can't see is coming to the end of its life, and you look at communities where they're having major utility problems, that is the tip of the iceberg. And you have to be thinking about that. So it's not just about when you ask for the resources, the financial resources to replace something, it's the financial resources to be doing the repair and replacement, the renewals year over year over year. So you're touching a certain percentage of that infrastructure routinely. And you're not waiting until everything fails and you have a massive price tag. You're taking bites at it and you're looking long term. That's, I think, the biggest thing for city managers in today's society is you can't think about the problem that is happening today without thinking 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead, how are we going to address that? You have to think long range and you have to think systematically. You have to be a systems thinker in today's society of seeing how all these pieces, everything ties together. And if you're just looking at one gear, okay, I understand this gear, but if you don't understand when that gear turns, all the other gears that turn with it within this machine of local government, you're going to miss out.
You brought that up. Like if I need to replace a road, underneath there, what's the life cycle of the pipe? What's the life cycle if you have underground cables and all that? What's the life cycle of the protective mechanisms on that?
Or if I have to replace the pipe, and I wasn't necessarily planning to replace the road today, what do I need to do to that road? Should I go ahead and advance that road project at the same time, even though it may not be due for something for another 3, 4, 5 years?
You might as well.
But why tear it up twice? Why create the inconvenience for my citizenry? Yeah. You know, you have to look at all those different factors.
Oh, so the timing of the sewer repair, the cable repair, the road repair may not be perfectly synchronous.
But if you can get them
together,
it's a greater benefit to the end user.
Yeah, we have, like in my neighborhood, we have a road that's being rebuilt. And they're like, it's going to be closed for 6 months. And that's not just a resurfacing project. They're probably doing all the underground wastewater treatment, all the flow of the surface ponds, whatever. Yeah.
Hopefully they're
or else they have one guy with a shovel doing the whole thing for 6 months. Gentlemen, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
closing question. So our audience are people who want to be deputy city managers, city managers. What advice would you give them? And I'm twofold. What general concept about public works they should know about? And where should they go to learn more?
Well, learning more, belonging to ICMA, belonging to FCCMA, participating in the various committees on those two professional organizations is a very good way to get plugged in. When I was a graduate student, that's how I got plugged in. And
well, by the way, you just brought up something. They don't require you to be a city manager to join these organizations.
No.
So you were a student.
Yes.
And you joined what, ICMA?
ICMA and FCCMA.
Okay, so that's an important point. I didn't know that before, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as advice, be able to manage your emotions because you're going to be on a roller coaster in this profession, and being able to manage that through the good times, the bad times, and the trying times.
How do you deal with that? I'd be a wreck.
Now, I deal with that because I have a loving spouse that will listen to me cry and whine for almost 26 years. That's what I have, but I can't speak to what other people.
Well, we all have our outlet. You have some way to manage it.
Your champions.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Counsel and advice for somebody wanting to step into this role.
So I think first thing is if you're going to be a deputy or a city manager, you have to understand that you're a jack of all trades. You may be a master of a few, but you have to be a jack of all trades. And you don't have to be the resident expert on water sewer, on how to build a road, on how to connect dark fiber cabling, or whatever the issue is at hand that you're dealing with on public works. You have to have really good people that can do that. You have to spend time with them so you understand the challenges that they're facing and what their resource needs are. I'd also suggest that whenever you have an opportunity to participate in some of the state associations that speak to those things, so if you're dealing with a lot of water sewer issues, what's your involvement with AWWA, the American Water Works Association? Go to one of their conferences. If you're dealing with streets and traffic issues, go to the Florida chapter of the APWA or the national congress that they do for that. If it's in parks, you have those same opportunities. Not to go and become an expert, but get some immersion within it and some exposure to it. Meet some of the contractors and vendors that are there, get some insights firsthand of what the new technologies and best management practices are. A lot of those things are going to come up through your staff, but you, again, are thinking long range. You're thinking bigger picture. You're trying to assemble all these different pieces, not just the one piece that comes from this department or that department. So being able to have some understanding of those things, I think, is a really good skill when you sit down with your folks and you understand what they're talking about and you can relate to it a little better. It also helps you communicate that upward. Our roles, and I can't speak as much for Jerome, but oftentimes what I have found is that the deputy city manager is the tactician of the team. The city manager is the strategist.
Okay.
And you can't be both. I'm going to say that. Where I've seen more failure or more struggle and angst
is when the city manager tries to get into the weeds.
When you try and be the tactical, the field general instead of the strategist that's kind of solving the whole war here, you can get lost in it. It's so difficult to do both.
And then you lose perspective. You come off that mountain, you get down into the weeds, and you lose perspective. In our opening episode, we talked about what does it take to be a city manager, and it was thick skin. You talked about how you deal. By the way, how do you deal with that?
Well, thick skin is the key there, but you have to be confident in the decisions that you're making. You have to realize you're not going to please everybody. You just can't. And oftentimes what you're not pleasing them on is not something that is relevant or as significant as what they make it out to be. They're just unhappy with something. Do the best job that you possibly can do. Be confident in what you're doing. Be honest, ethical, legal in everything that you do, and try and address the issues. You're going to make a whole lot of people very, very happy. Some people are going to be unhappy no matter what you do. You have to have a certain intestinal fortitude to walk away from it at the end of the day and say, if they didn't like it, they didn't like it. I did everything I possibly could to solve this. Even the person that calls and complains that their garbage didn't get picked up or their water got shut off. They want to pass that blame on to you. You have to be compassionate and empathetic to them, but you never should accept the blame for something that's not your own. And when you can get to the point that you realize that, you'll stop doing it, and it makes the job a lot easier.
Yeah. You have to do the best for the most, and that's kind of your guiding light.
Excellent, excellent. One of the things I love about this, and looking through the prism of your eyes, is it is absolutely a lifelong learning journey. You are, while you're not trying to be the expert at anything, you're going to go from a public works project, you're going to go to a meeting on human resources, you're going to go to a meeting on open records, you're going to go to a meeting on park management, about how to do, as you saw, sports tourism. The breadth of the issues you deal with has got to be the part of that gasoline that fuels your tank.
It is. We always say in my office that don't get too high up into the clouds here and look down. You'll scare yourself to death. So you've got to stay kind of grounded within that. You're pivoting daily from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And if you could manage the time that you have on a schedule, that's fantastic. But a schedule is just a pipe dream. It's a really good idea because that's going to change as soon as you open your eyes. That schedule has already changed for the day. And you have to be able to be flexible enough to make those pivots to take on whatever challenges being thrown at you right then.
Excellent, excellent. T. Michael, thank you. Jason, thank you so much. This is really informative. Really appreciate you both.
Thank you for having us.